There's a conversation I find myself having with buyers practically every single day, and it has almost nothing to do with what's actually happening in Baldwin County right now. I recently watched a buyer spend months requesting virtual showings and running numbers on countless properties. Rates, insurance, HOA fees, rental projections. Those were the words coming out of her mouth. But what I heard underneath all of that was something completely different. What if I make a mistake? What if I buy now and something changes? What if I wait and regret it? The fear of making a decision without knowing the future, that's the conversation nobody's having out loud, but it's the one that's actually paralyzing people. So instead of giving you another market forecast that pretends to predict the unpredictable, I'm going to show you what's really happening beneath the surface. The emotional conversations buyers are having, the questions they're actually asking 6 months after closing, and why the people moving forward right now aren't waiting for certainty that doesn't exist. Because the buyers who end up the happiest aren't the ones who waited for perfect timing. They're the ones who figured out what they were actually afraid of and made the decision anyway. When buyers tell me their biggest concern is interest rates or insurance or HOA assessments, I don't disagree with them. Those are real concerns. They affect affordability, monthly payments, ownership costs, and long-term planning. But most buyers aren't actually paralyzed by the numbers themselves. They're paralyzed by what the numbers represent, uncertainty. What if I make a mistake? Is the conversation happening underneath every spreadsheet. When I mentioned it to her and shared that I had just recorded a video about it, and it made me think of her, she said, "That's exactly right, Marcia." So we had a really healthy conversation, and she was able to move forward and put her first rental property under contract. The fear of making a decision without knowing the future is what's actually stopping people. Sometimes I ask myself a question when buyers say rates are their biggest concern. If rates drop tomorrow, would they actually buy? Sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is still no. And that's when I know rates aren't the issue. Rates have become the symbol of a deeper hesitation. The same thing happens with insurance. Insurance absolutely matters, especially on the Gulf Coast. Buyers need to understand the cost and they need to do their homework, but sometimes people become so focused on one line item that they lose sight of why they started looking in the first place. If you are looking at Baldwin County right now and something keeps stopping you from moving forward, ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of? Is it the number on the spreadsheet, or is it the fear of not knowing what happens next? That's the foundation. But knowing that you need to move forward without certainty doesn't answer the deeper question. What are you actually trying to create? Because buyers obsess over the wrong scorecard before they buy, and 6 months later they realize what actually matters. And that's where we go next. One thing that struck me as I was thinking about several of my recent closings is that everybody asks about the same questions before they buy. Interest rates, insurance, HOA fees, assessments, rental income, monthly costs. Those are very important questions, but what's interesting is what almost nobody asks about. Nobody asks whether morning coffee overlooking the water would become their favorite part of the day. Almost nobody asks whether they would use the boat more than they actually thought they would. And nobody asks how many evenings they would end up spending on the balcony watching the sunset. Nobody asks whether morning coffee overlooking the water would become their favorite part of the day, or how often their grandkids would suddenly want to come and visit and stay. And nobody asks whether they are buying a property or buying a completely different way of living. Buyers spend months trying to make sure they don't make a financial mistake. What they spend far less time thinking about is whether they're making the right lifestyle decision. I can't remember a single client calling me 6 months later and saying, "I'm so glad we spent all that time discussing the interest rate." What they do talk about is completely different. They do tell me about the sunsets they watched on the balcony, their grandkids playing and wanting to come back over and over and stay, family dinners that they never had before they relocated, finally slowing down, morning walks on the beach, friends who unexpectedly started coming and visiting and staying. They tell me about the memories they're making, their quality of life, and how improved it is. The things buyers obsess over before they purchase and the things they value most after they purchase are never the same things. The financial questions matter, the numbers matter, the due diligence matters. But if we're only evaluating spreadsheets, we can miss the bigger picture. Sometimes I find myself asking buyers, what are you actually trying to create? Are you trying to create a better quality of life, memories with your family, more time with your children or grandchildren? Are you trying to create freedom? Some decisions are financial decisions, but some are life decisions. For us, moving to Orange Beach wasn't a financial decision at all. It made no sense on paper whatsoever. It was a life decision. We were trying to survive. We were trying to heal. We were trying to build a different future. Looking back, if I had only viewed the move through a financial lens, we would have missed everything it ultimately gave us. The numbers are part of the conversation, but they're not the whole conversation. Even when you know what you're trying to create, buyers still get stuck searching for the perfect property that doesn't exist. And the search for perfect is costing people the life they're trying to build. Nobody likes surprises. Nobody gets excited about increased costs. Concerns about HOA assessments are completely understandable. But what assessments remind me of is that every property comes with trade-offs. Buyers often spend so much energy searching for perfect that they forget perfect doesn't exist. Every building has a story. Some buildings are investing heavily into maintenance and long-term improvement. Some are incredibly stable, but buyers often spend so much energy searching for the perfect that they forget that doesn't exist. There's no perfect building. There's no perfect property. There's no perfect market. There's no perfect timing. Every meaningful purchase comes with some level of uncertainty attached to it. Buyers tell themselves stories. It's a terrible time to buy. I'm going to wait until things settle down. I missed my opportunity. What's interesting is that those stories change every few years. The headlines change, the markets change, the concerns change, but fear tends to stay the same. Sometimes my job isn't helping people understand the market. Sometimes it's helping them separate facts from the stories they've been telling themselves. The reason I understand fear so well has very little to do with real estate and everything to do with my own life. There was a season when nobody could tell me how my story would end. Doctors couldn't, specialists couldn't, I couldn't. There were far more questions than answers, and they gave me zero hope. What that season taught me is that life doesn't wait for certainty. Most of the time, we don't get certainty first and then take the next step. We take the next step without certainty. That's true in health, and that's true in relationships, and it's true in real estate. When clients come to me worried about rates, insurance, assessments, or market conditions, I don't feel like my job is to eliminate every unknown concern because that's not possible. My job is to help you gather good information, understand the risks, understand the opportunities, and then make the best decision you can with the information available today. Certainty isn't coming, perfect doesn't exist, but that still leaves the question, what should you actually be paying attention to? Because the property you choose matters less than whether it fits how you want to live. Buyers often focus on the property itself and overlook the building or the community or the experience of it all. But a condo isn't just a condo. Every building has its own personality, and that personality doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. Some are quiet, some are social, some are heavily owner-occupied, and others are investment-occupied. Some attract families, others attract retirees. Some feel energetic and playful, and some feel peaceful. Those things don't show up on spreadsheets, but they absolutely affect how happy somebody is after they buy. The same is true for location. I've shown properties that were similar in price, size, and even rental potential, but one was clearly a better fit because of how the buyer wanted to live. Direct Gulf front or direct bayfront? Do you want to spend your time boating or beaching? Buyers are rarely choosing between a good property and a bad property. They're choosing between different futures, different lifestyles, different experiences, different ways of spending spending their time. Real estate is often less about finding the best property and more about finding the right property. That's what I'm here for, to help people create the life they love. The buyers closing in Baldwin County right now understand something that the paralyzed ones don't. Every decision comes with some level of uncertainty, and waiting doesn't eliminate it. The buyers who end up the happiest aren't the ones who waited for the perfect timing. They're the ones who made the decision anyway. The buyers who are moving forward right now aren't doing it recklessly. They've done their homework on rates, insurance, HOA, fees, rental projections, but they've also asked themselves the deeper questions. What kind of life am I trying to create? What will I regret more, moving forward with uncertainty or waiting and missing the opportunity? Uncertainty isn't the reason to wait. It's the reason to make sure you're asking the right questions. They've asked about building reserves, management companies, historical appreciation. They've gathered good information, but what separates buyers who move forward from buyers who stay paralyzed isn't access to better information. It's the willingness to make a decision without having every answer. The buyer I mentioned earlier, who put her rental property under contract, she wasn't waiting for rates to drop or insurance to stabilize. She was waiting to feel certain. Once we had that conversation and she realized certainty wasn't coming, she was able to move forward. The buyers moving forward in Baldwin County right now aren't doing it because they have all the answers. They've asked themselves what they're actually trying to create, and they've decided to create the life they love. They're doing it because they understand that waiting for perfect conditions means waiting forever. They've separated what they can control from what they can't control, the future. They've asked themselves what they're actually trying to create, and they've decided that creating the life they love is worth the uncertainty. If you're looking at Baldwin County right now and you keep finding reasons to wait, ask yourself, am I waiting for better conditions or am I waiting for certainty? Because better conditions might come, but certainty won't. The decision you need to make is whether the life you're trying to create is worth taking the next step without having every single answer. If you're looking at Baldwin County right now and trying to figure out what the right next step looks like, I hope this gave you something to think about. The numbers matter, the due diligence matters, but so does the understanding what you're actually trying to create. And if you'd like help working through that conversation, I'd be happy to help. Thanks for spending time with me today. I'll see you on the next video.